Hey guys, so this is National Master Kevin Yang here again, here to cover something different. All that my previous video series with ruling the openings is sort of like an introductory, but now um it's different. I'm gonna switch it up. And so today we're gonna cover something that is one of my earliest games. So this is the earliest game I could find. It was my fifth tournament. This tournament was memorable to me because it was, first of all, the first time that I got first place, and it was a scholastic, and I also got a little bit of cash. So, good things there. So, let's look at the game. I mean, I don't think I played that badly as an 800, but that's hard to say. So, okay. So, in this game, I was black. I was black against an opponent named Alton. And so this was the third round of the tournament, and I had won my previous two games. So let's see how it goes. So Alton pushes. I also push symmetrically. He develops his knight, just like we said in our opening principles, development, and you notice how we're both controlling the center in some way, right? So I protect my pawn on e5. Then comes he protects his pawn, sort of like maybe symmetrical, and I strike out with this move. This is another strike in the center, right? We want to take this, so that's the goal. But, okay, my opponent plays this move. In this move, he wants to attack the queen, right? So I block, and bishop takes, queen takes, takes, and now my opponent plays this move. Now, at my level now, I just see that, he's sort of violating our opening principles, right? We talked about developing all our pieces before and how he might be restricting some of the space for maybe castling queenside or just in general, like maybe the knight will come out and block this queen's way. So maybe this wasn't the best choice for him. But okay, I proceed to develop, and my opponent makes a very interesting move. He puts out the queen to trade, right? So that's the goal for him. But he's also attacking this bishop right here. So I know that a lot of beginners like to trade a lot, but they also want to simplify the position. So they can deal with something less complex. And I guess to a certain extent that is right, but maybe now we should look at this as does this trade benefit me, right? It's not all about the trade, maybe it's what you get out of the trade. Like, do you improve your structure? Do you improve any piece in the game? And I guess my opponent thought, okay, once we trade the queens, my knight gets here, right? And that might be some sort of improvement. So that was his judgment. Okay, so what I did was I pushed the pawn. I told him to knock out of the place. So he comes back, and I continue my development, right? So I'm still following opening principles, and I'm still maintaining this structure. And in this game, I did spend a lot of time, I remember, but it paid off in the end. So my opponent goes here. Now, he has this intention. He wants to develop this bishop, right? The bishop is hindered by this pawn, so the bishop can't do anything this way. And my opponent probably recognizes that moving the bishop here does not do much, right? Sort of like restricted here and can't really get anywhere. So my opponent tries to be very innovative. I castle, finishing development. My opponent plays this pawn move, g4, right? So he wants to attack the bishop. So I retreat. He gets the knight out. Now, okay. Somehow, even at the 800 stage, I found the best move. I played knight here. Now, playing this knight here is I want to capture this guy, right? I want to fork the two pieces. So my opponent responds in a more panic way. He plays knight here. Now, he doesn't realize the threat, this fork, right? So if I were now playing this position, I would definitely take this pawn, take the c2 pawn, get the fork down. But okay, I was more protective in those times, right? And I thought, he is threatening to take this pawn, right? So what should I do? So what I did was also okay. So I played knight back, right? So when I played my knight back, I also had in mind that the rook was going to take this knight, and I probably somewhat forgot about this idea, but it'll come later. So then my opponent gets a little bit reckless. He plays this pawn move. And I remember snapping the knight off right away because I knew it was a mistake from my opponent's part. So my opponent takes the pawn, and somehow I still don't recognize the idea of the fork. So I take back. My opponent directly attacks my pieces, and I go back. I think in this case, if I were to play this again, I would definitely move the rook not all the way, but I'd move it here. The reason being that this rook comes here to the D file, right? And this rook comes here to the D file, and it's sort of a double up on this open file that we want to take advantage of. So then let's look back at the game, right? So now my opponent plays c3 to provoke this knight from going away. So somehow now I just realize that I can play this move. So this is played knight c2 with the fork on the rook and the king. And he moves the king, takes, he comes in, he wants to trap this guy, right? So I play rook takes. Now I'm threatening his bishop, so which is another great move that I found. So he plays bishop d1, and I do get a little greedy by taking this pawn, but I think it's one of the best moves in this position because the knight wants to come out, right? But it doesn't have a square yet. So when the bishop takes, now black has this knight square to check on to be safe. And this rook is guarding the second rank. So it's really important for me to take that pawn because that pawn was controlling some squares that I needed. So now he's in desperation. He plays this move. So I play knight check. He takes with check. I take back. He takes the pawn. I play a check, not intentionally, maybe intentionally, because I wanted him to play there. And then by playing there, I could play this check, right? And then take the rook the next move, since the bishop is checking the king right now. Okay, so I decided to move in. And then, well, my opponent decided to move in. And now I took. So now he's getting all desperate, right? The king can't move. The pawn moving is just suicide. This pawn doesn't do much. This knight is kind of in a bad spot. So now he plays rook check, right? So I know I'm not in much danger, so I just move the king over. Now he moves the rook to attack this pawn. Okay, so what do I think? Um, I thought, okay, I don't have any way to defend the pawn, right? I know I'm going to lose it, so let's first back up the pony and let's see what happens. So, okay, I made his knight go back, and now I played this sneaky move. And I believe I saw the intentions behind it, but I wasn't so clear. So my opponent played rook takes, falling into this trap, this back rank checkmate. Let's see if you can find this. So remember that a checkmate consists of checks, right? And trapping the king. So you can pause the video and see if you can find the checkmate. Okay, so now I'm going to reveal the checkmate. Hopefully you came up with rook h1. And now you think, okay, how does white defend, right? The king is cut off from here by this bishop, right? So the bishop controls the escape squares. And this knight is kind of helpless on the corner. So the only move my opponent could make was rook e1. And it's a free rook, so we take it, and it's checkmate. So this was the earliest game I had in my collection of games. So I'm looking forward to share more of these with you, but in this game, I basically demonstrated how I kind of knew the opening principles already, right? You could see I was developing the knights, I was castling, I was making threats, and then I took these free pieces, and my opponent just, after he lost this knight, he kind of sort of gave up. So that was unfortunate on his part because maybe he could have came back, but who knows, right? And this knight check was really resourceful. And the bishop on this square was really the key to my success. And you'll notice that this a8 rook was never developed in the game. So I would say this was a pretty well played game on my part. So when I was young, I did lose plenty of games, but I assure you that from all the games you do learn a lot. And so hopefully, even though I won this game, I also hope you learned a lot. So thank you.